Don't you just hate those times where you do everything you can to prepare something awesome, and then you record it and it just doesn't quite turn out? Well, that's kind of what has happened here today with me. I'll tell you about it here in just a second. You're listening to the Alex Spicer Show.
Could you sit still? Could you sit still when your friends have given up?
Okay, so I was in Vernal and I did this talk and it was awesome. I mean, I loved it. I had so much fun. I prepared well for it. And just to pat my own self on the back, I was like, yeah, that was probably one of the best I ever gave. I felt I had really put in the time and was able to do so smoothly. And I go over the video and audio, and the video's fine. I mean, it's not perfect, but the audio's awful. And I was really hoping, even last week, to share with you my that speech as my episode. Just that way you could watch all the thing, how it went, but more importantly, obtain the information that is in it. But it's just, I guess the audio gods are working against me. So instead today, I'm gonna share with you. I want to share with you what I shared there. Now I haven't been practicing. I have my notes right here, and I'll try to follow them a little bit. And I'll try my best to give kind of a condensed version of what I gave there, because I think this information is vital. It's really important. And the topic of what I talked about was called family prep, and I call it family prep because really there's a lot of problems going on in the world, and we the main problems that I see in America happen to be problems when it comes to morality, when it comes to freedom, and we have to be able to defend it. More importantly, our kids need to. You see, I had given a presentation at the Vernal Expo and talked about how to raise your children to be like the founding fathers. And afterwards, some lady came up to me. I'll call her Mary. Mary came up to me, and you could tell she looked very, very down, very solemn. And with great emotion in her eyes, she began to explain to me what happened to her child. She said, Alex, I raised my kids to be very much like what you just described. And I took them to church. I taught them these moral values. There was never any problems growing up. I just sent him off to college, and he just came back for Christmas break. And he came back and denounced religion, all religion entirely. Said it was all false, it's all fake, and also didn't believe in any of the other moral values that we taught him. And when we tried to discuss it with him, he had basically all those responses that politically correct people say, and he really just wouldn't discuss it with us. He wouldn't allow us to ask him questions and to really try to help him see why what he was taught growing up isn't wrong. And then she asked me, Alex, what do I do? How do I help my son? Because of that experience, I decided, no parent should ever have to go through that. No parent should ever have to raise their child to be taught all these things that are right, that are good, that are patriotic, that are a positive lifestyle to live and values to keep, and then have your child brainwashed by the education system or by whatever else. It's a horrible experience to go through. And as a child, and as one who speaks from experience, it's a horrible experience to be taught that, to be taught all these things by your parents, and to grow up in a culture and atmosphere in your family where you believe one thing and then you go out in the world and the world tells you something completely different, and more so will tell you that what you were taught is completely false and wrong, and will beat you down until you believe what the world wants you to believe. And so I really feel like that should never ever happen again. The parents should prepare their children in such a way. Their children should be prepared for these challenges that are going to be sent at them, that are sent at them daily. And it's good to be challenged, but it's not good to be overcome. Because what's going on is our kids and us every day, we are we are constantly being attacked. Our minds are being attacked constantly by politically correct culture and politics. And more importantly, we have to acknowledge the fact that we are being defeated by politically correct culture and politics. That our minds are under attack and our minds are being defeated. Our children's minds are being defeated. And the reason why they're being defeated is because we have not prepared them for to face these challenges and be able to come out victorious, to be able to hold firm to what they believe, that to be able to face these challenges and defend what they've been taught, what they believe, in a world that's completely secular, that doesn't believe as they believe. Because what happens is we teach them to believe in God, we teach them to believe in religion, we teach them, in these moral principles that really America was founded upon, and then we don't really teach them how it applies to everyone universally. And so what they have is they have an understanding of things more spiritually, more personally, but then they're challenged with all sorts of really crafty but pathetic reasoning as to how what they were taught is wrong, because this politically correct version is right for everyone. And so because they can't find a way to relate what they've been taught to everyone else, they go, oh, well, I guess what I was taught really only applies to me or those who believe it. But if you don't believe it, I guess it doesn't apply, so therefore it must be false because it's not universal. That happens all the time. I saw that happen to my friends. I faced that challenge all the time growing up. And we have to do a better job. There is a better way. So here are 3 keys I want to teach you. 3 keys for you, and especially for you to teach your children so that their minds are prepared for the challenges. These are 3 keys, what I call the 3 pillars of our freedom. They're God, religion, and morality. And if we know these 3 things, not just spiritually, and not just in that context, but also in a secular sense, that way the rest of the world can understand their relevance, and also that way your children and you yourself will know the relevance, so you don't get overcome by the excuses and challenges out there. Well, then you will be able to stand firm, so will your children, and freedom won't die, because these are the pillars of our freedom. They are God, religion, and morality. But we have to understand them secularly. If freedom is going to continue, if our children are going to survive these attacks in their minds, and if our children are going to be prepared to be the right sort of people who can shoulder the burdens of this nation and carry it off to something greater, to a greater America, to a more fantastic future with greater freedom, prosperity, and more light and truth. So go back in time with me in your minds. Let's go back in time to September of 1776. George Washington was finishing up his 2nd term as President of the United States, and he had come to a conclusion. He decided that he was done, that he would no longer serve in any major or official capacity as a leader for America, that he had served for more than 46 years in service to his nation, and more than 20 of those years he served specifically as the leader and face of the American cause and of the new found government. And after more than 2 terms, he decided, it was time to hand it over to the American people. But he was concerned. He was worried. What does he do? He knows that it's a fragile time. Will the people carry it off and continue to perpetuate what they established, or will they spin off into anarchy or tyranny? That was a grave concern of his. What could he teach them? What words could he leave with them? What would be the best words so that they remain on the path and don't let freedom die? That way, all the things that he sacrificed and all the sacrifices of all these men that he led, all these men and women who gave everything they had, even their own lives, for the American cause, did not go to waste. How could he help the American people not spin off into the wrong paths? And so he enlisted the help of his friend Alexander Hamilton and drafted what we call the farewell address. And in it, he gave us some very good clues as to understanding how to keep America free. He said, quote, "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. And let us with caution indulge the supposition," in other words, and let us cautiously entertain this idea, that morality can be maintained without religion. Indeed, experience and reason both forbid us to expect that national morality can subsist in exclusion of religious principle. Right there, he gives us the clue to understanding what we as the American people should know and defend in order to keep America on the path, to keep us free. And he brought up the two of the major three principles or pillars of freedom. They are religion and morality. And I love how he describes how morality cannot exist without religion. Now let me go into detail here. Why morality? Well, you need to understand the definition of morality, and that is, the definition is the principles of distinction between right and wrong, good and bad behavior. That means that morality is not relative like we're always told to, because the definition says the principles of distinction. Principles, as we know, are eternal. They are unchanging. They stay the same. And so if there are principles that help us understand between what is right and what is wrong, that means there is a fundamental underlying morality that is universal for all people, regardless of culture and time. And if we follow that, then we can build upon that some laws, because we have to understand that our laws are dependent upon our perception of morality. And so whatever we believe what is moral, whatever we believe to be morally right or morally wrong, we then base our laws upon that. And so if we don't understand morality, then we have corrupt laws where we are no longer treating each other equally. And there is no such thing as moral relativity. Now, there are nuances of what is moral, but those are usually things that are not that important. There is an underlying fundamental morality that we must understand in order to create good laws. Now, here's the thing about these pillars that I want to share with you right now, and that is that either we follow these pillars, we obey them, and we live them to our prosperity, to our success, because it holds this bridge from where the world has always been, this darkness, to where the world is now. And it's greater light, prosperity, equality, freedom, all these wonderful things. Either we follow those and bridge this chasm and get there, or we follow their counterfeit and continue the cycle of all humankind. And the counterfeit of morality happens to be political correctness. That is the new version of morality out there. And honestly, it's false. And as you know, it doesn't lead to freedom. It leads to tyranny. We start to believe in things like hate speech. So we should create laws that restrict the freedom of expression, because we don't understand what is moral anymore. Now, what about religion? Why did he say that we cannot expect national morality to subsist without religious principle? Well, there he goes right there. He explains to us principle. The definition of morality is dependent upon the principles there. Well, how do we learn those principles? How do we understand what those principles are? Do we just pull them out of the air and this thing is really good. Yeah, let's go with this. No. We understand these principles by religion. That throughout all of humankind, human beings have learned the correct principles traditionally through religion. And some of the great principles that have helped us to understand what the fundamental universal morality is, this foundational morality, came from the Ten Commandments. And additional teachings as well, other ideas in religion as well. But the Ten Commandments was a really great start, a foundation to look upon to understand what is always wrong, what is always right, and what laws are good to uphold that. So that is how human beings have understood what those principles are, to have good laws, to have national morality. And when we get away from that, we start to forget what those principles are, and then we're taught false principles. Now, the counterfeit of religion nowadays is politics. And politics will teach us all sorts of false principles, and therefore teach us a false sort of morality, which it is. It's teaching us political correctness, and that is ruining our freedom. Equality starts to go away. We have to believe that religion, that morality is universal. There is a fundamental one. It must remain in the public square. That it can be right for all. It's not just relative. That way we have good laws. And religion, we must allow religion. We must defend religion and say it can exist in the public square because it helps us stay on the moral path. Now, there actually, and I will say, religion, it is the pillar that has like two arms. And one side is that it teaches us the principles. Now, there's another side to it. Now, I want to share with you a story that highlights the second arm of the pillar of religion and also the third pillar, which is God. Now, we've all heard of King James because most of us have heard of the King James version of the Bible. But many of us don't understand that King James was actually quite a horrible tyrant. He was often referred to as a lion. He was quite, he was very pompous. He knew the scriptures like the back of his hand, but he felt as though that anyone who disagreed with him should be punished. He really disliked particularly a group of people known as separatists, because they would criticize him. They didn't believe, the separatists believed that the Church of England could not be reformed. They didn't believe like Puritans that they should try to reform it or whatever else. They just believed, hey, we should just go back to the original principles and tenets of Christianity and stop this whole charade. But that did not go well with King James. In fact, he was the king who coined the term the divine right of kings. This idea which the monarchs of Europe have lived by, but he coined the term, and that is that anything that the monarchs do happens to be the will and mind of God. That they had the ultimate moral authority to decide what is right and what is wrong. And so therefore everything that people were and had existed to serve the king and his government, basically, his power. And he could use it at any time. He could confiscate anything that you had. He could imprison you. He could kill you. He could do anything. And he would do those things because if he didn't like you, my goodness, well, it doesn't matter. He has godly authority to do whatever. And in 1604, a young man, 14-year-old William Bradford, was facing an ultimatum. He was living with the families of his uncles in this house, and they gave him an ultimatum. Get out, they told him. Get out right now. You either renounce your faith in separatism or you leave. Well, William Bradford was not about to renounce his faith. So at the age of 14, he became homeless, and he had to live with the separatism for the next 16 years. Experience all the hardships of the separatists, where they would be driven from place to place, have their property, their businesses, their homes destroyed or taken over by the government. And after 16 years, the separatists felt as though God were calling them to the Americas. They weren't sure why, but they felt they needed to go there. And so they sold what little they had to obtain passage on the Mayflower to go to the Americas. William Bradford and his wife, even, they felt so strongly they needed to go that they were willing to sacrifice anything. And they knew that the journey would be so treacherous that they even left behind their 3-year-old son to leave with his wife's parents because they feared he would not make it. And so after crossing the seas, going through more than 66 days of storms, they arrived in the Americas. And when they got there, more than half of them died of starvation and disease. But luckily, with the help of the natives, they were able to some of them were able to live, half of them were able to live, and they were able to plant corn and other crops. And through miracles, they had an abundance of food. Things were going well for them. And so after almost a year being there, William Bradford was now the governor of the Plymouth colony that was established. And he issued a proclamation, a Thanksgiving proclamation, and telling everyone that they should gather together for a day of Thanksgiving where they would praise God and thank him for the many blessings that he had given them. And he said that in that proclamation that they should thank God that they can worship him according to the dictates of their own conscience. The other part of religion as a principle of freedom, the other arm, happens to be the freedom of religion, what we often call the freedom of conscience. Now, unlike what the Obama administration said, freedom is not a code word for discrimination, and here's why. It is a freedom that applies to everyone. Because the religion, its secular definition, to understand what it really is that religion is nothing more than your system of beliefs by which you live your life. That means everyone has religion. Everyone on a personal level has their own system of beliefs. No matter if we go to an organized religion and we share a number of beliefs with other people, we still have our own group of beliefs. So we're not going to believe exactly the same as anyone else. Whether you're atheist, Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, doesn't matter who you are. You have your own religion, your own personal religion, your own system of beliefs. And if you can't live according to your own beliefs, you can't live as you desire, so long as it's not violating other people's natural rights, then you don't have the freedom to do anything else. If a government can say you cannot believe as you desire to believe and live according to those beliefs, then it can also say, well, I don't agree with your belief that you should be protesting right now. And so you lose your right to protest, your right to freedom of expression. If you believe that you have the right to defend yourself even by a weapon because you feel your life is in danger, but the government goes, I don't think actually your life is really ever in that danger, nor should you really have those weapons, whatever else, then it takes it away. Freedom, the freedom of religion, is the gateway freedom to all other freedoms, and it is universal freedom. It applies to all people. And just like William Bradford, he believed in separatism, in being a separatist. So he was willing to lose his home over that. He believed in it so strongly that he was willing to go through all these hardships. He believed God was calling him and the others to the Americas, so he sold what he had and went there. Even though he couldn't have a full measure of rights in England, he was able to at least live according to what he was believing, and it led him to the Americas where he could have the full freedom of conscience. Now, like I said, the counterfeit of religion is politics, and we must allow religion to exist in the public square, because what is happening is politics is always meant to be full of opinions, no matter what background they come from. And what's happening today is that we're told, and your children are experiencing this, is that they're told that because what you believe in comes from a spiritual background, it doesn't apply here. In fact, it's wrong. Only if it comes from a secular background can it exist here. Only if we approve of it. Well, when you only allow people who have a very similar sort of purview on the world from a secular side to discuss things in the political sphere, then you actually create a religious monopoly in politics, because you then have politics being driven by a majority of people who believe so similarly, who are basically part of an organized religion because they are essentially following their political religion. And so when you do that, you are no longer getting other points of view that can be helpful for the political processes to make our freedom expand or grow or be maintained, to have prosperity. It goes away. So we must allow religion, even if it comes from a religious sort of a background, to exist, because it adds quality, adds value to the world. And also, as I said before, it teaches us important things like proper principles. We need to have religion in the public sphere, always. Now, God As you saw with King James, he believed in the divine right of kings. Whatsoever he did was the mind and will of God. You need to know that the definition of God and his role in society and in people in government is that God is the highest moral authority, which means that if you remove God out of the public square, if you don't allow people to have their own God in the public square, what happens always throughout all of human history is that once that is gone, government comes in and becomes God for the people. If people can have their own God, even if God is themselves, or they consider God for them, like they are God unto themselves, or God for them is the universe, or a tree, or Heavenly Father. If they can't have that, then government becomes that for the people and will enforce it upon the people. This is why you have all of the great civilizations and groups throughout human history. Their government is very religious in nature, that it takes the cultural religion of the people and then uses that to have the moral authority to do whatsoever it does. Whether it's the Incas, the Mayans, or the European nations, these countries always went this. They took the cultural religion of the people and then said that those in power were either gods themselves or they had God's authority to do whatever, and they would abuse that. They would harm people. They would kill people. They would confiscate their property. They would violate all of their natural rights, because they had the ultimate moral authority to do so. And we can tell when a government is going that direction, because a government that tries to replace God for us and become God unto us is a government that can decide for us what the value of human life is, can decide for us when human life begins, can decide for us what is a property and what is not a property, can decide for us what our rights actually are or aren't. Now you got to remember that we know that government exists to protect our natural rights, not to define for us what those natural rights are, because those natural rights exist outside of government. But you know that a government is becoming godly, in other words, corrupt, having ultimate moral authority to do anything once it starts defining what those rights are for us. Now, this pattern exists throughout all of history. If there was ever a time that a group of people did exist with greater freedom, they've always spun off into tyranny, and the pattern is always that their government became godly. I think the greatest example are the Romans. Look at the Romans. They had the Senate, which is secular. But the second their temporary dictator, Caesar, refused to step down after a time of war, he became their permanent dictator. And what did he become? What's no coincidence that he became a god. He became one of the Roman gods. Every single Caesar after that was considered a god, and he led the people. He did whatever he wanted. And even if you look at the more secular governments that never took the cultural religion of the people to have the authority, to claim authority to do whatsoever they would, the secular ones, like communism and socialism, well, those have actually been even more dangerous. They still claim godly power, ultimate moral authority. That's what God's definition is. They still claimed it. But because they refused to acknowledge any sort of cultural religion, which still would at least hold them back in conscience from doing too much evil, instead they performed the greatest evils. In the 20th century alone, these secular godly governments killed more people, and not even during war, just killing their own people outside of war. They killed more people during that time than all people had ever died combined in the history of the world. They killed more than 100 million people, and not in war. Because they had authority to do whatsoever they would. There was no conscience to hold them back. There was no cultural expectation. They threw all those away. But they believed that they could do anything they wanted because they were the ultimate moral authority. They had all authority to do anything, and you could never question it. That's the danger there. So we must allow God even to exist in the public square. It's like the quote that is often attributed to William Penn. He said that men must be governed by God, or they will be ruled by tyrants. There's a lot of truth to that. We must allow God to exist in the public square. to all of us bring our own God to the public square, because if we don't, then it will be replaced. It does not just be, it cannot be erased. It is one of those fundamental things that must exist. And if you get rid of your own, it will be replaced by government. And the same goes with religion, the same goes with morality. Well, we have the tools and the information we need to better understand what the fundamental morality is. We have the religion and teach us what those principles are. We have the freedom of religion, but those things are going away. We have God, but that's going away. We must be bold and bring these things out into the public square and not back down, because these things are being replaced by a whole new religion, which is politics, by a whole new God, which is government, by a whole new morality, which is political correctness. As you can see, it is harming us. It is dividing us. It is ruining our freedom. It is corrupting our government and our people. So I'm just going to end there. That was the basic information I gave in that presentation. Teach your children, and I'm going to add this because this is part of the presentation as well, but teach your children these things and teach yourself these things to understand these secular applications, universal secular applications of religion, God, morality. That way, we can defend them openly in the public square. People are not going to respect your opinion if you bring up God, if you bring up Heavenly Father, if you bring up Allah, if you bring up the Bible. Because if they don't believe in those things, it doesn't matter. So they have to see that these things are so important that even they should defend them. Even they should be concerned about them. Because without them, we don't have freedom. It is gone. It is ruined. America will not continue without these things. So stand up for these things. We must stand up. We must stand together. We must be united. Despite having differences of opinion as to aspects of these things, we can come together and make positive changes. We can maintain America's freedom, push back the tyranny that is growing, and really, truly save our nation. Thank you so much for listening to the Alex Spicer Show. I've had a great time teaching you these things, sharing with you basically what I had shared in this presentation. If you liked what you heard, click that like button and subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. You can also go to alexspicer.com, and there's a lot of articles and other episodes there. Live free until next time, and I will talk to you next week.
Search for